Hey, it's Dr. Jennifer Stoll from Cimarron Global Solutions again. And man, I've been recording a lot today. I'm a little bit wiped out, but I'm going to save some energy for this last little piece here. And what I'm doing is I'm diving into some of the data from our national benchmark study on resident sentiment towards sporting events that we conducted with our friends over at Longwoods International. If you recall, just a couple of weeks ago, we dove into a section of the data that we did not cover in the report, and that was travel more than 50 miles last year to attend a sporting event by region. Last time we looked at it by region and we broke down the nuances within the data. Well, today we're actually going to take just a slightly different look at that, and we're going to look at it by generation instead. And if you're astute, you might recall, oh yeah, didn't you talk about that in the main study? Yeah, we did. It's page 23, chart number 2, for those that are curious. But this is an important topic. We want to see what generational differences are occurring when it comes to travel to sporting events. So we want to take another layer deep and talk about it in the context of generation today. And there's a few things I want to point out to you here. The first one is going to be this Gen Z right here, right off the top. Gen Z, you can see, in total, just slightly fewer people traveled for all kinds of sporting events in Gen Z than did millennials last year. But something interesting I want to point out is when we look at this, Gen Z is actually technically 13-year-olds to 27-year-olds. We did not survey kids. We only surveyed adults. So what this tells me is that from 18 to 27, we've got some pretty high numbers for Gen Z. We're going to be paying attention to this. Obviously, kids that are in their teens that weren't adults were not included in our survey, but it stands to reason that some of them traveled as well. Now, they would have had to have gone with adults. I understand all that. So these numbers for Gen Z might actually be a little bit higher than what our data actually reports. So as they age up and their consumer behavior patterns start to take shape, we're definitely going to be paying attention to that. Now, I want to jump down to another thing, and that is looking at millennials here. And what I'm going to do, I want to look specifically at one tier of event, the big kahuna of them all, the mega sporting event. So think huge World Cup, Olympic Games, international competition, multiple countries, global media, travel to participate and to spectate from across the globe. And what's interesting to me about this one is millennials actually led the way last year when it came to travel of more than 50 miles. Again, that's the industry standard definition of travel. Tourism is over 50 miles to attend a mega sporting event. Again, we only surveyed US residents that were adults. So why is it that 14% of millennials, not a huge number, but still the highest among all the respondents, traveled to a mega sporting event? Well, I'm not quite sure to answer that question. We do know that there was something major taking place, mega taking place last year. It was the Olympic Games in Paris. That occurred late summer, and we fielded this survey in October. So this tells me that there was a contingent of millennials that traveled for that mega sporting event. Now, mega sporting events are also more expensive. They occur less frequently. So this does surprise me a little bit that it was millennials that led the charge, but it could be a testament to their culture and the lens through which they live life. This is going to be really interesting to watch going forward. And it's because we're getting ready, as we've talked about ad nauseum before, to host in the US the most unprecedented decade of mega and major sporting events that we have ever seen and we will ever see. So I want to see how this pattern shifts, particularly when some of these events start coming stateside and when they become a little bit more travel accessible for the local populace. No doubt they're going to be expensive, but with the World Cup, remember, and even part of the Olympic Games with where they're hosting different venues, there's different places to consume this information. So we're going to have to be really careful that we're not just equating apples to oranges when, in fact, the Olympic Games in Paris took place in, by and large, one metro area, whereas we all know the World Cup is taking place in a slew of destinations across the U.S., a few in Canada, and a few in Mexico as well. So we're going to be paying attention to that when it comes to mega events. Always interesting, and what these millennials are up to. All right. Now, the last thing I want to touch base on is I'm gonna actually toggle back to a few of these. I'm gonna leave community events off for the time being, but I want to look at this right here. This bar, Gen X. Now, Gen X, those are people that are 44 to 59, and we see them across the board responding with lower reported travel to tiers of sporting events, including youth and amateur, college and professional, major and mega sporting events. And this is probably the most surprising piece of data in this splice from my perspective. Because I look at this and I say, Gen X should be the generation that has the propensity to travel. They should be at the life phase where maybe their kids are a little bit older, they're growing up, they're either adults or they're out of their house, so they have the freedom to travel. They also should have, by this point in their life, probably the disposable income to be able to travel to some of these types of sporting events. Now, I understand boomers. The older you get, the harder travel might become. It might not be as worthwhile. You might not have the energy or the stamina for it, on the boomer side. But these Gen X's, this should be a huge group that we focus on, and we should see consuming travel to sporting events more than 50 miles. And that just didn't happen at the pace of millennials and even their Gen Z counterparts last year. So I want to be paying attention to this. This is only 1 year's data, but we definitely want to see how Gen X responds. I would love to see it not tail as much as the boomers have, but we want to see that propensity to travel extend out as long as it can for that age bracket. So these are just some things that I'm going to be watching. And when it comes to what all this means to you, we've got a couple bullet points over here on the left that you want to pay attention to. But really, what I want to drive at in this type of analysis is how are we using this information? How are we not only recruiting events that align with the generational needs of our communities, but also how are we communicating the opportunities to both participate and spectate in those events based upon our target generation? Now, one of the other things we've done in this piece of data is we've listed some of the things that are the cultural dynamics for each generation. So take those into consideration. Realize travel patterns are shifting across the board. Gen Z, for example, we also want to watch their propensity to support or believe that sporting events are positive for their communities. We wrote about that in 2023. It's in one of our bullet points over here on the left. These are all the things that we want to watch. Ultimately, our goal in paying attention to this nuance is to be able to provide you with the type of data that you need to make good, solid decisions for your organization and ultimately help your community. That's what we're here for. That's why we do these breakdowns. Please reach out and let us know if there's an area of our resident sentiment study that you'd like us to dive deeper into. We're planning on covering a ton of these topics. Almost look at them as chapters in a book. And we're going to do deep dives on the things that we believe are most prudent and most important for the industry. So stay with us. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we'll be back with more very soon. Until next time, I'm Dr. Jennifer Stoll from Cimarron Global Solutions.